Thank you, and welcome to
You told me the one about like dragging it.
Dragon milk, yeah, short legs.
Thank you. Welcome to our continuation of our May 15th Monday morning meeting. It is now 2:04, and we are starting the continuation of that meeting. And we're starting with, okay, we're going to start with our Randy Bischoff, our budget director, and then we will go. Jeff McMorris was getting continued, and so we'll do that after.
Thank you, Commissioners. Tess and I are here just to kind of go through the preliminary start of our 2024 budget season. The first thing we'd like to go through today is the budget calendar. So we've got the main thing that we're looking at here on this budget calendar, of course, is going to be the public hearings. So basically, we're looking at sending out a communication to all the departments in the first part of June with priorities and kind of how the budget is going to go for 2024. The departments will actually start entering their budgets in July 10th into Questica, and then they will finish that on that Friday, August 4th, and then we will go through those budgets, put them together, put binders together for the commissioners, and we will present that to you then on September 5th. And the September 5th is a statutory RCW date. It's kind of what it says. That's when we have to present that to you guys. So from there, then we usually hold 3 budget hearings. Last year we did 1 in October and 2 in November, but that is totally up to you guys as to when you would like them held. And so we're looking to you for your calendars and when you would like to have those hearings held.
This is where we provide feedback.
Yeah, that would be helpful. That's what we were kind of looking for, yes.
And an idea to see the conversation is, we had talked about with the commissioners' strategic planning meetings being set up for the first and third Mondays of each month. That might be a natural idea to have these as part of those strategic planning sessions. That's kind of where we've held workshops in the past on these sort of things, but that gives an opportunity for us to kind of pin those into the strategic planning sessions as well. And are you talking the round? You're talking
the round tables, yes.
The round tables are the ones that we have on
So
the
the public-
Tuesday
the public.
afternoons. Okay, my apologies. I was thinking workshop. Yep.
So the roundtables, if I remember last year, people could zoom into them.
Yes, that it's held during the 2 o'clock consent meetings, commissioner meetings. We go after that. We go at the end of that typically.
Open for
We have.
public comment.
So we can do it anytime.
Yep.
So you're looking for dates, how about the 4th and the 31st?
The
Tuesdays.
4th of
Yeah.
December.
October.
Oh, okay.
4th of Wednesday.
October.
Oh, I'm sorry, the
third.
3rd and 31st.
Okay.
Sorry.
Be a couple of days.
Just joking.
And
It's
typically,
the 4th in one of those months.
you've had 3 of them. I think you passed a resolution
I think it's in
a few years
resolution,
ago.
it's 3.
Yeah, there were 3 public meetings.
And then which weeks does we don't meet as commissioners the week of Thanksgiving?
And the week of the 13th, I believe you are at
The
Wasatch.
Okay, so those 2 weeks are not good for,
Correct. So the week of the 13th and the week of the 20th, if you're not meeting for Thanksgiving, during Thanksgiving week, those weeks would be out. That is correct. The 7th, of course, is an election day. Typically, we haven't
Right.
had those on them, but we could. Last year, we had the last one on the Tuesday after Thanksgiving, so we had it on the 28th.
I didn't think that would.
Right, I think we didn't do it on election day when we had.
We did not.
When we had the evening ones,
Okay.
because we didn't, but it had 5:30,
Right.
like initially. So, but I think at 2 o'clock would be,
Yeah, none of us are on the ballot, so
right.
what do we care? I mean,
If you have one on the 31st, do you want to have one the following week, or do you want to go to the end of November?
what's easiest for you?
I'd say if we went to the end, Tess, I'll let you answer. I was gonna say the end of November would probably be easier for us. Give us a little more time between the 2nd and the 3rd in case there's any changes. We'll also can talk about the levy on the 20.
So the
8th as well.
27th, we've got don't we have to do the levy on the 27th?
Technically, the levy has to be filed with the assessor by December 15th. by our
Maybe that
CW.
statutory deadline for counties.
So why do we have on the schedule here that it has
I know.
to be certified
That
on
was
the
a last year
27th?
date, I think.
Yeah. And last year it did push until after we adopted the budget.
And keep in mind too, these are the public roundtables. So this is sharing information out to the public, what we've historically done. But you all will have had many workshops beforehand to really understand it. So how we've typically phased it, of the 3, we do the first one to really focus on revenue. We do the second one to really focus on expense side. And the third one is kind of a wrap up of all those to see kind of how the budget culmination is coming together before the commissioners adopted the first part of December. But there'll be, like you all will have workshops starting in September with the first view of the preliminary budget and then multiple rounds afterwards. So it's mostly based on the resolution, mostly for the public's benefit, and it won't be new information to all of you.
So what's the drop dead date for adopting the budgets? The 11th?
The 4th of December this year.
Tuesday
4th
in
in
December.
December.
Yeah, it's on
Yep.
Monday.
Okay.
First Monday.
Excuse
So
me.
for the first round table, I mean, what do you guys think about either October 24th or 31st? Because that first one is usually just the general, like, this is the way the budget is structured, this is the way,
Here's our revenue.
this is
our
how a
output.
county budget works. I mean, it's always very high level, it's very, kind of just making sure folks that are gonna follow through the process, give them sort of that foundation of this is what a county budget is. It's not a ton of detail really, that first one. That first one you can, I mean, honestly, we could have that kind of as early as we wanted because
That
it
could be
isn't
into
so
September.
detailed.
Yeah.
Third,
Oh, did you mean 3rd of,
October.
oh, I'm sorry.
I figured the 3rd of October and the
Okay.
31st. That way we do the basic introduction, then they've got a full month almost to
Okay.
do whatever fine tuning you have before we go out to the public with the second series.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood, because I was looking at the thing that
Yeah.
had 2 of them in November and only 1 in October on.
Yeah,
on this
And that's
calendar.
just what we did last year.
Yeah,
I crowded October with 2 of them.
So
So,
31st is Halloween,
Yes.
so you might want to do it the week before, just depending on timing. I mean, I would love to have at least one of the public roundtables later for those people who might want to participate, after normal, like 9 to 5 working hours, if possible. I mean, I'm open to having,
Like an evening?
well, yeah, like maybe at least one of them is in the evening so that those who could only
We could do
attend
it
in
the
the evening.
31st, and you could come in costume if you wanted.
Everybody could come in costume, we could have a costume parade.
I would
But-
think we'd want the last, if we're gonna do one in the evening, I would think it would probably be our 3rd one that we do in the evening. Because then people have more information that
Have
they're
more
working
information to
with
comment on.
when they're commenting, yeah.
But I'm fine with the 3rd and 31st if you're talking more like a 3 to 4 p.m. is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay, at the end of our regular meetings, okay. But then, yeah, I think that if we could aim for an evening one, whenever that November date would be best, it sounds like. But is the 28th gonna be too close to when we
it's
need
too
to?
late, because if
yeah.
we do make any changes based on
They
comment,
don't have any time.
we don't have any
Right.
time. So then the next one would be the 7th, which would be election night, which is not the ideal.
Could we do it on a different night, like if it's in the evening, we could do it on a Monday evening or something, I don't know.
I would stick with Tuesdays, just to, that's what we said as the days in the
That's true.
resolution, so.
See the challenges of having evening meetings?
So the 14th is when Wasack is in town.
Yep.
That is-
So there'll be like evening activities with other
Yeah.
We
commissioners
don't
and
meet that
such.
week.
Okay,
Because the conference starts, I think, on Tuesday.
on Tuesday,
some
Wednesday,
stuff's
okay.
on Monday. So,
Well, do we want to meet on Thanksgiving week? He said cautiously.
No.
No, good, thank you.
I'll be around. I'm married to a teacher, doesn't get that day off,
I know,
unfortunately.
your choice.
Well, what about the 14th?
True.
I mean, if we're committed to doing an evening, I mean, Wasack is in town, how about we just a 5:30 on November 14th? That evening? No?
Will there be like
Any
a,
activities going on in the
Yeah.
evening?
But I thought they really don't get rolling until Wednesday.
there's,
It's Wednesday and Thursday are the evening stuff. I mean, Tuesday is usually the travel day, but since it's here in Spokane, it's primarily a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday conference, isn't it?
I haven't looked at what the schedule is
Okay,
for it yet, but
okay. I was just, okay.
we were not planning to meet.
No, I know that. I have them,
So-
they're all canceled on mine too. I'm just saying. I mean, because either way, this would be a special meeting regardless, because we don't have anything.
For this, we could
scheduled.
just set the first two and say the third is to be determined yet.
I guess.
And it is my anniversary, and so no.
Okay,
oh.
I get
So
it.
it's like, no matter what.
So this has nothing to do with Wasack. That was just a cover.
Well, no, last year we did the bingo, and that was on Monday night. Yeah, bingo was on Monday night.
Don't you have any consideration for romance?
Okay.
So no, so I mean, that's the only reason I can say that is because it's like the 14th is my anniversary. So last year I had to be in Seattle on Sunday, because we did start the conference. We started some stuff on Monday, and like Monday night was the bingo night, so I spent my 30th anniversary playing bingo with Wasack. So I was doing my job.
Alright.
But, so I don't know, we haven't determined what the schedule is here, but it's definitely not always just Tuesday through Thursday, so.
Okay,
So
I mean,
for the public
let's-
meetings, should we at least do October 7th for the first one? October 31st for the second one, and to be determined for the third, for today?
Or do we wanna do the 24th
Could do that
of
too.
October.
and then that
October? Yeah,
that
that's
could be
fine.
the evening one.
And that could be expense focused and
In
it
capital.
may be, more inviting to public comment.
that'd be fine. That's a good option. Do you think you'll have enough detail for the public to be able to weigh in on some different choices? Okay. All right. So really, if we then had another one
Yeah. The kind of wrap up could be
on the
Tuesday.
7th, kind of just after our normal meeting, but not too late for voters to, people do wanna tune in.
Sure.
Be at the 2
Okay.
o'clock.
On the
If that, if you think you'll have enough, like,
That's like a-
information, people to give input in on the
Yeah.
24th. Okay, I like that.
So the
So the-
24th would be so we go 10:03 for our normal 2 o'clock, and 10:24 and do an evening 5:30. And then 11:07, which would just be at the 2 o'clock.
So now we got the hard part.
That was the hard part.
Done.
Unless Commissioner Jordan, did you have any other thoughts? Okay.
When's your anniversary, Chris?
Yeah, when's your anniversary?
That's confidential. No, it's not in this series of months. It's in September. So I think this sounds like a good plan. No one else will be invited to anniversary events.
I like that, but it doesn't work out for me at this point.
All right, so now we can start talking
It's
about
falling
next
right
year's
during the
budget.
Wasack.
So as the three of us, Tessa, Jason and I, were going through setting up next year's budget, one of the big things that we've been talking about on a monthly basis recently is our sales tax. We are in an historic period of growth. We never before has this economy had 11 plus years of positives. The previous record for the US was just short of 10 years, being in the late 90s through the early 2000s before the tech bust. Prior to that, most good periods were 4 to 5 years. You always come back down. We are in a historic period of growth, which has allowed us to do a lot of things. Commissioners have been very good. We went from a very small fund balance. We've now been able to put money away to meet best standards for the GFOA, which we'll see in the next slide. And plus, we have a little bit of extra money that we've set aside for those downturns so that we don't have to do the cuts that, Al, you said you guys had to do back in the early teens. Ugly. So, but anyway, on this sales tax graph, if you want to go back one, Ron, you'll see this last year we had planned 3.9% for sales tax. We got a report from the state of Washington this last Friday, came out on Friday, which is basically saying that for March, the state saw basically 0% year over year on sales tax.
Yeah.
We've been trending slightly better, but that's not going to be a lot better, which means we're probably going to get close to being a push for the first 5 months on our sales tax projections, and may mean we end up the year a little bit less in our sales tax projections. So what we've, in our initial view of what this budget looks like, we have built in a 1% increase in sales tax year over year. Just for perspective, each percent is $800,000. So if we were at zero, these numbers you're seeing are revenues 800,000 too high. If it was a -1, it's 1,600 too high. The other thing that you will see in a little bit of is also we only put in revenues that are not commissioner voted. So commissioner voted, I mean the 1/10% for sales tax, or property tax, the 1% increase. We did not put that in here. We did not put any levy shifts in here. And I got ahead of myself, so we'll go to the next slide now. I kind of skipped fund balance. So this is what the commissioners have been able to do with fund balance during these good times. So my computer went blank. So currently, and these are preliminary numbers as of right now. We should have final numbers in the coming week. But for our fund balance, we have 53 million that is non-spendable. Those are things like the note receivable that we have with the PDF. So when we issued a couple of bond series and we gave them the money, that's a loan that they owe us. Sportsplex is the biggest one. And so they owe us about a little over 52 million. The last 5 million was so that they could buy the Value Village. So that is most of the non-spendable, meaning we've already spent that money. We can't spend it again. The next section is restricted. These are items where like state and federal grants, where they come with, you can only spend the money on certain things. So that is not free for us. The committed section, this is where the commissioners have done a great job and got us up to GFOA best practices. That's $67 million. 41.7 of that is for the 2 months of budgeted expenses. That is the GFOA best practices, and this is the first year we've been at that. This also includes 25 million of one-time money that we've designated, which would be the ARP, and then for the Avista Stadium, where we designated some one-time monies for that. So those are the three big things that make up that 67 million category. The 13 million, the assigned, most of that is our PO rollovers, where it isn't done by a legislative authority when we set it, but we did roll 8 million over. And then we also have a Costco commitment where we need to look and see if that maybe needs to move up to committed. But we had committed to Costco that if they asked for a reimbursement, we would give them up to $5 million when they built up on the north side, and they've not asked for that yet. So that gives us the remaining balances, which is $27.5 million. So this really is the money that would be used during those bad times. So if we go to the next page,
So Randy,
Yeah.
and everything you just said, we just got a budget update for STA, and everything you just said is consistent with what we're hearing with STA with regard to sales tax growth. Historically, we've been at 3%. This year, I think we're probably gonna be flat, maybe 1%, but I'm not optimistic.
yeah, with the report, we just got this Friday, 1% for next year would be the most I would be willing to go. Yes, Amber?
The total, sorry, the unassigned, that's
Yes,
just everything that's unassigned.
that's the remaining balance, or the remaining amounts, meaning that 27.5 million. The commissioners have not said, do this with it. To me, that is how we live through the valleys. So we've gone through the peaks and now we've built up 27.5 million, so that is the money that you would live off of if you didn't want to make cuts so deep to meet revenue shortfalls.
So, because I'm thinking at the city, we had several unassigned fund balances. We had one specifically called the rainy day fund,
Right.
which is about 5 to 7 million when I left. I don't know what it is now, but and that was really for those recession timeframes when you might need to adjust for ups and downs with sales tax. But the other unassigned was more just to have as a buffer in case of other, like the best practice to have X amount in your savings account.
Our best practice, the GFOA best practice, that is up in the committed. So we passed a board resolution to go with the GFOA best practices. To have the 2 months of
That's in the, that's in the committee.
That's in the committee.
Okay.
So the unassigned really is for, let's say somebody said, a building burns down and we need a new building. That could come from that 27.5 million. Sales tax falls $3 million, and instead of laying a bunch of people off, we're gonna go into that 27.5 million to not have to do that.
One of the reasons why that fund is, larger than it historically has been is because we've been able to use ARP money to cover expenses that otherwise would have come out of this category.
Like the new system.
The fairgrounds improvements, new system for the health district and all of those.
The ERP system,
Yeah,
those types of
yeah.
things.
That's where that money would
Got
have
it.
come from, and having that there as our safety net so that we don't dip into our required reserves for the underwriters and jeopardize our rating. We have maintained that fund as our.
But it looks like it took a dip from 21 to 22.
That's the change in the
Because you-
policy.
That's,
Because you
yeah,
put, it went up into the committed.
Oh, I see. Got it. It switched.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
The
Scott.
the other thing to keep in mind, commissioners, is that unassigned, as Randy will point out, is in the March, September timeframes where we haven't collected property taxes, that is our working capital reserve as well. So we'll be,
Cover payroll.
that number will be, when you get to the March, then you get to the September timeframe, it'll be much lower than that today. So it helps us so that the commissioners use that to cover our ongoing expenses because of the timing of when we collect property taxes.
When I first got here, we used to have to borrow money in March and in October to be able to meet payroll until the property taxes came in.
and I remember that too.
Yeah.
First time I was here, and even it was close when I came back, so.
And so
That is
it
very-
basically is the cash flow.
So what,
But how much, do we know how much we have to have for cash flow on average throughout the year then?
we are tracking, we have that tracked. I do know that, even as early as 2020. Before COVID hit, I was concerned we were not going to have enough cash to meet a payroll.
They've mapped that out by month for the
We-
last couple
we-
of years.
we are-
And we can see what.
Today, I would say we are
Comfortable levels.
in comfortable shape right now. From that standpoint,
To a downturn in sales
subject to
tax.
downturn in sales taxes and everything else. So one of the things we just saw this last month is our property tax, and the state saw this just as well. Property tax collections weren't what they expected to be, even though the property taxes are levied higher. Again, it means probably a coming downturn because people or somebody else did, or maybe a mortgage company, whatever, didn't pay taxes, so the treasurer didn't get them. So we got actually less money than we expected on March 1st by about $2 million.
And in fact, there was a story in the newspaper a couple weeks ago talking about increase in foreclosures.
Yep,
So
that
that's
is
the other-
increasing. Numbers are still low, but there was a market increase in that in the last month.
Canary in the mine.
So this next page is our first out of the box, what would we expect to see in a budget? Given the assumptions that we said with no property tax increase, a 1% sales tax, the other revenues we would expect to see, we built in all the current authorized positions, and we built in all the union contracts, we built in all of those raises, put benefits. We did add in the 13th Superior Court team, and that team is 4 people, a judge, a JA, a clerk, and a recorder. Now, I'm not sure if a team needs all of those positions, if some of those could be shared or not. For example, a JA costs about $105,000 a year. Does each judge need their own JA, or can they be shared? But anyway, if you had all 4, that'd be $500,000. We also, and I'm not sure if we can do it or not, but supplies and professional services are showing no increase over what was budgeted for 2023. As you know, expenses are going up, which means we either have to become super efficient or do things differently to hold that. But a ream of paper, which 2 years ago you bought for $24, now it costs $50-some. Postage, you heard it from Tom. I know you'd hear the same thing from Vicky in elections. Postage is very expensive. It's getting more expensive every year when they're doing large 5-cent increases. So this assumes no increase. As you will, and we only put $1 million, in capital projects, which would be for minimal sheriff's new vehicles. Basically, with the benefit we've had in the last few years, we've been able to replace a lot of their vehicles. This gets us back to a lower program of, just slowly taking them through, not doing big purchases. But we have no other capital in here. With this fully loaded, again, showing no increases for supplies and professional services, which, lawyers are getting harder and harder too. We're having to outsource more of that as we get conflicts. This shows us being $5.5 million short of a balanced budget. So with that $27.5 million, as we've projected this out, if we filled all of those positions and did nothing, we would probably have enough to get us through 2026, and then we'd be out of that $27.5 million. So we've got about 3 years. That $27.5 million would take us through about 3 years if we fully funded. The next 2 slides are those positions that are included in this budget that have been open more than 180 days. Now, a number of these are because, if you go to detentions, we just can't find people. So what we've done in the last few budgets is we've done a vacancy adjustment for these types of people. And we would, for example, like sheriff's deputies, detention, deputies, sorry, the word's missing me. You know, I think you probably still want to leave those as authorized, but we would probably do a vacancy adjustment for those. But there's other of these positions that have just been around for a long time. They haven't been filled. They've been grant positions. The grant went away. The position just never left the authorization stage. So there's a number of these, I think, that we would recommend that we just take out of the authorized as well. But at the worst case, at least use all of these as a vacancy adjustment. And the effect of that is the next page, Ron, I think there's 53 of these positions. 57, excuse me. So if you go to the next page, one more, Ron. If we were to take those out, that would reduce our shortfall. So if we didn't fill any of those positions, if we left them all authorized, or at least left some of them authorized but filled in a vacancy adjustment, we would be much closer to a balanced budget. We'd be at about 681,000 shortfall. Now, this does mean, though, that if the position is authorized and then they do fill it, we would have to come up with more money to allow that. So that's where we may not want to authorize all of these positions. We may want to be selective as we go through that. For others, we may just want to do the vacancy adjustment, especially with the detention, because I know they're the largest one of those, over 180 days. But either way, right now, and again, this only includes our normal revenue. It does not include any one-time revenue, because typically the commissioners have used one-time revenue for special projects. For example, next year, we will have 1.27 million coming from the PFD for the credit enhancement. So back in 2019, when they bonded, or excuse me, 21, when they bonded and you lent them your credit, they owed you in 2024 25% of the savings, or 2 million, whichever was less. That savings, the 25% comes in at 1.273 million. So we will be getting that payment. That has not been included in this budget, again, because it's one-time money, and typically the commissioners have been very good about not spending one-time money for recurring expenses, because then it goes away and then you're just stuck further down the road. But these would be monies that you could use for other building projects, any other capital type items that you wanted. So this is kind of what we're seeing coming out of as we get into budget season. As we deal with the memo, are there any focus areas that you'd like us to focus on for the budget?
So do these budget numbers include any increased spending for long-term planning? We have,
They do not.
they do not. So that's on top of what
That
we
would be
have
on
here.
top of this, yes.
So we've got to figure that there's probably at least 2 more planners and then some outside consultants. So maybe another
Probably
$400,000,
looking at
$500,000
$400,000 to $500,000 for that.
on top of that. Okay.
Yep.
And we'll talk a little bit about that, Commissioner, in Jeff's presentation. Scott Chesney's been working on building some projections of what that resource might look like. So we've got a couple different ideas on how we might solve for it, but that might be for only a couple of years, and what do we look at beyond that?
And then on the money from the PFD.
Yes.
From the financing, I thought that had to go to like the fairgrounds, because it kind of had to go to something that was similar.
There is some restrictions on that money, yes.
than-
And I would have to pull back that resolution to read it back to you verbatim. But it is something like a Parks Fairground type
kind
deal.
of, yeah, something that was similar to like a public facility.
Yes,
That it went back
Has to
to.
be spent according to what the 1/10 sales taxes that the PFD can spend, we have to spend similarly.
I just want to
So
make
it
sure
may
that it's
not
not
just be-
just
Yeah,
general.
you
General
can't use it
fund
for
maybe.
general fund
Yeah.
expenses.
Okay.
But it could offset other capital dollars that we would,
At this,
At the fairground.
like at the fairgrounds.
only at
basically.
certain locations,
Yeah.
okay.
There's an eligible use definition within that RCW that gives us, it's not hugely wide, but sports, entertainment, those sort of things.
But it'd be things that would probably offset REIT 2 or REIT 1, so which would save us that money for other things. Because right now, of course, REIT dollars are coming in less heavily than they have been in the past. And we'll see, I think we'll see that continuing to go down a little bit. The only thing saving us is the price of the houses right now, but the number of houses, sales are going down. We collected 800 and just short of 50,000 for the first 4 months. And last year we were at over 5 million, so we're not, we budgeted 3.1, which is probably where we'll end up in that area.
We budgeted for a pretty substantial haircut in that because we knew, with interest rates rising and stuff, we felt like the volume might slow down. It's definitely slowing down.
Well, you have the interest rates rising, and then you also have a reduction in community projects, like there's not as many schools being built as they typically would be. A lot of money has been spent, so you've got that working against you.
So any for the memo that we're gonna send out, first part of June, any focus areas for the departments?
So let's go back to these head count over 180 days. So very intentional how Randy and Tessa put this together, because we do have a number of positions that have been open for more than a year, some of them 2 years. And they continue to reside in the budget, which is taking up budget dollars, which is not allowing you to really look at how you're investing and spending dollars when those are already committed somewhere. Knowing that we already, it's early, but it's a preliminary budget deficit of 5.5 million. This is an area, if the decision was made, listen, everything that has been unfilled for greater than 180 days, we're gonna remove them from the budget. Maybe the sheriff and detention a little bit differently, but we have vacancy adjustments in there. Move from the budget helps us have a fighting chance to get to a balanced budget. And then a messaging to the departments could be, if you find you have a need for these positions as the years goes along, and we have a better sense of kind of how our revenues are looking, it could be something that the board considers for budget amendments during the year, but at least it starts the year off with those are no longer authorized positions, no longer funded in the budget.
Is there, I guess I'd want to have those discussions with the departments ahead of us, saying that we're gonna take those positions away, rather than just take those positions away. See what, why are they keeping them on the books?
Well, as we went through them, there were, I don't have the exact number, but there were quite a number of them that were based upon, they were filled originally with grant dollars. Grant went away, position just stayed there. They never filled it because they didn't have the dollars to pay for it, but it stayed as an authorized position. I know why certain other ones are open, and some reasons. I think for the corrections deputies, I think yes. I know they're short. I wouldn't say they're necessarily ones that you're going to want to not authorize, but that's something more we would do the vacancy adjustment. But there's other ones in here that things have changed in operations and
Right.
they need not to be authorized there,
So I think that's where, can we work with those departments to get them off to, that it's, just because a position's been there, doesn't mean that it should stay there. But it should still be a discussion.
Okay.
Some of them are with other electeds, their departments. So I think it's definitely, and I think some of the past practice, probably like in the sheriff's office, is they have those authorized and didn't have the vacancy adjustment, and so they were planning on, that's how, part of how they filled their budget.
Right, whereas this
So
last
it's
2
trying to be
years,
consistent.
we've been using more of the vacancy adjustment. And so they haven't been given that budget, even though that position was still authorized.
Right, so but it's having that conversation now, so they actually are realistic with their budget, instead of them using that as their slush,
Correct,
um,
because I've heard that
for-
from other places
for
also.
their department, yeah, Mr. French.
So I noticed in the breakdown of the positions that are vacant, I believe the business manager position is now vacant, but it wasn't on your list. So does the sheriff anticipate rehiring or refilling that?
We know that that position is gone.
Okay.
And it wouldn't have been on here anyway, cause
It wasn't 180 days,
It hasn't been open for 6 months.
but also,
Okay.
Sheriff Knowles, replaced that with an under sheriff.
I suspect, and we can do that, Commissioner, I suspect we'll get a very mixed bag response from the departments. There are gonna be some who will say, yeah, you're right, I don't need that. They're gonna say, some who are gonna say, well, I don't need it, but I need it to balance my budget because I'm gonna be using that to spend elsewhere. And there's others who are gonna say, oh, I absolutely need it. So I think we're gonna get a mixed bag response back. And we'll still, I mean, the reality is we still have to solve on $5.5 million. This was one of the ways that we could have done it without cutting, it's easier to remove a vacant position than to make some other decisions on filled positions. And you want to avoid doing that.
No, I agree, but if we don't have that conversation with a department head or an elected, we're gonna get that conversation. So, it'll be back to, then they'll start to talk to each one of us individually. So I'd rather have it be a message from the board saying, we wanna have you guys have that conversation because we're serious about figuring out how we fix this. So.
Well, I remember last year there were, I won't I won't name names, but a couple of departments when they'd come in and they'd say, I need two more FTEs in this position. And it's like, you have 5 vacancies in that position. And it's like, and this, we have a good feeling this next year we'll be able to fill it. And it's and as I'm looking on here, I don't think they had a good year at filling them. So,
Any other comments for the letter? We can bring back drafts for you guys to look at.
So if there are departments that are not listed on here, does that mean they don't have any
They
positions that have been vacant?
No, they
over
don't have any positions.
180?
Yes, that is correct.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, because there's some departments I would think would definitely be on here with
Like
some
the
vacancies.
clerk's office or some of those that,
And some other ones,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I'm just,
And we
I'm
hear-
really
yeah.
surprised that there are some departments that aren't on this list with vacancies over 180 days. But, okay.
And again, these are just the general fund departments also. So
Okay.
we did not go into any of the enterprise funds.
Those funds.
Randy, I didn't ask you both this before, but how about our internal service funds? We look at those that would have a general fund impact.
We did not put them in this report. We do have that data, but we did not put them in this report.
and that would primarily be like our IT group, and they don't have many vacancies right now. And they, Kevin has been working hard to retool his positions to fit the work product he needs to accomplish right now. So we've been, trying to help him have a little more time on that, but his vacancies have been pretty short timeframe too.
We just might want to take a peek at that really quick too, because while it's not a direct charge to general fund, there is an indirect charge back to them, so there could be some potential impacts there too.
Just a couple clarifying questions. For the unfilled positions, is it a real mixture of reasons why they're not filled? I mean, are they primarily lack of recruitment, or are there other reasons for those vacancies?
One of the large reasons, because there is a number of positions, I know we went through it, is past positions filled with grant funds.
Yeah.
The grant ended. The position, they left it vacant because they didn't have a funding source, but it was never removed from the authorized position list. That is a big piece for corrections officers and for sheriff's deputies. A large piece there is the recruiting effort and getting people that want to work in that area, more so in the corrections.
So a grant, previously grant-funded position that's left vacant, that still impacts the budget?
If
it's
we do not, if we do not make a vacancy adjustment, yes. If we take it out of the budget because we know it's going to remain vacant, it will not affect the budget, but then why do we even want to leave it as an authorized position would be my question.
And if we deauthorize positions, is that a topic of bargaining for represented employees or not?
I don't believe that is, as long as it is not a filled position.
Okay.
That's all we had.
That's all you have today? Okay, any other questions for Randy then, or Tessa?
With, we're shooting Randy to have a letter.
First part of June, we would like a letter to go out to the department heads. Just say, here's the calendar that we're going over, that we're gonna be going with, if Questica is gonna be opening up July 10th, your input has to be there by August 4th. And then also here's some guidelines from the commissioners. So, what are your focuses? Are we going to say no increases to supplies and professional services? Are we gonna say you get only what you had last year and anything else has to come on supplementals? What type of message do you want in that letter from that standpoint? And as far as capital, because that would have to be a supplemental thing also, positions would have to be a supplemental. What type of
Try to
guidelines?
What we had last year. I think didn't we say that they needed to try to keep it where they were?
Yes, we did. And I could send that around, I can send last year's around to each of you. We can get that out to you today, just so you saw last year's, and if you had more comments,
And
you
so
can
you're,
provide that to us.
and then you're proposing a new draft. So
Yes.
in that letter, what is your assumption?
We have left those assumptions blank, waiting to hear what you guys had to say. As I said, the numbers presented assumed no increase. We just went with the budgeted amount. Plus, we showed one example taking a vacancy adjustment for all those open positions out. And then if they were all in there, you'd have a $5.5 million shortfall. Plus the 600,000 for planning and other things that come up.
Some of the things that were included last year, that you did highlight kind of some budget priorities, safety of our residents and businesses, emphasis on new and existing business job creation opportunities, and modernizing and streamlining our services to the county citizens. And then we gave them direction, their controllables, their M&Os should not exceed their last year's level, and their FT needs to be kept at or below their authorized FTs as of 7/1, as of July 1. So those are some of the things that we gave them explicitly based on some feedback from the commission at the time. And we also talked about kind of revenue forecasts and uncertainty with the economy and that sort of things. Kind of painted a picture for the departments.
So do we anticipate any revenue restoration as a result of our efforts at Camp Hope or some of the other efforts that were, done in that area?
Like recovery of our
Yeah,
expenses.
recovery of some of the expenses and stuff. It seemed to me that at one time, Sheriff Knezovich was talking about these monies would be recovered from the state or commerce for some of our activities out there to provide security and some other things for Camp Hope and stuff. And so I don't know whether we even made a claim for any of those, much less have any opportunity to recapture any of that cost.
I'm not aware of any
Okay.
that are coming or we're expecting to come, but that's just from the information that I've had.
Just asking.
Where are we on the FEMA reimbursements?
Really good shape. We've gotten,
Really?
Randy probably
Almost
has a better
more than
sense.
half.
We've gotten a significant amount of our recovery in that. Heather and team have been working really well. So I think I don't know which amount we're out right now, but we've had they've been submitting stuff and getting reimbursed. Not 100%, but 98%.
I mean, yeah, really
95%.
close to 100%. There were only a few items that weren't funded, and they weren't shocking when they weren't funded. And I think Heather said, because I asked her about this the other day, 5 of 9 claims with FEMA have been paid by FEMA. So there's only 4 outstanding, and they stretched the timeframes kind of odd on the way they were allowing the claims to come in. So we still have a chunks outstanding, but she expects almost full recovery on those, with the last kind of month or so being a 10% county match, I think was what it was.
That's good news, because those were kind of a ways out there, so.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's good.
Don't mean to be the bearer of bad news, just wanted to make sure that the team had a chance to give you just some early preliminary things. Get the creative ideas flowing around how we shore this up. We got some time to do it, but at least wanted to put a couple different ideas out to you for your consideration.
Commissioner Waldron. The revenue sources are coming from anything that's already in the budget. So for instance, like the combined communication, public safety tax, the mental health 0.1% tax, those are all different revenue sources, or is that not? Those are all separately accounted for from the general fund.
Special revenue funds. for
The
those.
mental health sales tax is separate and pays for a lot of general fund programs, so we see those transfers coming in.
That's just something, as a new
Yeah.
commissioner, I
So
would love to
that's-
sit down
And
with
you'll
you guys
get,
and
and
see
we
some of
do
those
kind of,
things.
we will bring a briefing of a lot of our special revenue funds over kind of the month of July is usually a good time frame for us to bring that while departments are working. Bring in kind of workshops on some of those specialty revenues that you guys see and have discretion over. So that'll be coming next.
That'd be good to look at where those dollars are being spent for those different sales taxes. And whether or not there's opportunities for moving around some of those dollars.
So for example, last year you did use some of the mental health sales tax for the NAFCARE contract for the detention services. That was because they had an increased charge. You had that money and the commissioners moved that to cover that portion of the contract this year to help out the general fund. Because it was appropriately for mental health, just for their.
Is there a fund balance that is carried over year to year for those different funds? Okay.
Yeah, all of our special revenue, the team tracks those things separately. General fund, as you can remember your time in the city, tends to be the primary focus because you must balance that budget. Revenues have to equal expenses, so it gets a lot of our time and attention, at least for the earliest first one to look at. But we'll also look at the enterprise funds with roads, transportation, the sewer, and some of our other departments as well, fairgrounds.
You have in here the 13th Superior Court judge and sort of the large amount that can add for one single department. Were there any other single departments
We did
that
not do
are
any other-
estimated to have a large or requesting a large?
The long-range planning that Al was bringing
Yeah,
up.
yeah.
We don't know of any others
Okay.
that we see right now
Okay.
that we're made aware of.
Okay.
But we would run the supplemental process similar to we did last year where departments can request additional funds if they are available.
Yeah, I
And so,
we'll wasn't
that.
sure if someone was any of the departments were reaching out to you yet saying, we're gonna need to do this. Sometimes it's based in the legislature passed a bill that says this, so now we need, a bunch more money for a bunch more people.
Nothing out of the ordinary.
Nothing like that yet. Okay.
Keep in mind too that for the long-range planning, we do have some dollars that we're expecting to see from the state to help us offset some of our activities that we have that coming at us.
Well, thank you, appreciate the information,
Bet.
it's always fun to present. Just gotta be aware.
We've seen way worse numbers, so I mean, like,
Try harder.
681 is about a tenth of what
I
it was.
can show you the 2026 numbers if you really want.
Well, there are still levers that you can pull, of course, and again, this was consistent with last year, we said, we're gonna just baseline revenue, conservative, don't put in there anything that the commissioners could act upon, let's see what we can live with out of the gate.
And I wouldn't say this is conservative, I think this is more realistic what we expect to get without any commissioner voted items. We did build in, for example, the property tax, Tom estimates they'll have $1 billion of new construction this year, which is down from their $1.6 billion, so that has been built in here, that $1 billion. But we did not put the 1/10 or the 1% increase in here because that is commissioner voted. We did not do a levy shift because that is commissioner voted. All right.
Good.
Thank you.
Now it's gonna take us to Jeff Morris. I was gonna say, Randy, do you wanna just?
Yeah, I can see that.
Just stay there.
So it's been a while, but we are bringing back ARP World to you. Here's, they'll put the PowerPoint up on the screen, but I fear we might have some smaller numbers font-wise. And then just by way of jogging your memory. For you and Al, if you could pass these down. The second sheet is just our historical, what has happened to date. Should anybody want to look that up as we go.
Josh doesn't have a spreadsheet.
Well, right here, look at this.
Got another one coming.
There we go.
So we have been just kind of waiting for the budget process, as Randy's been talking, and to see where the county was, what might come up, where ARP might fit into all of your decision making. However, the last 2 weeks, I don't know if any of you have seen in the news, the federal government is talking about clawing back unobligated ARP funds to help them in their budget process. The Senate took a vote roughly 10 days ago. It was a party line vote, which of course in the US Senate makes it a close vote. And it did fail to claw back at this point. The House has not taken any votes, however, they're on the record saying given the opportunity, they would bring these funds back to DC. And just last week, there were some articles in Politico where President Biden clearly said the subject is on the table, he's taking a look at it. And I think political wisdom would say if the White House tips the scales towards it, you'd probably sway a few votes in the Senate and it would go through. So wanted to come, we'll go through the numbers here in a second. We roughly have $17 million that would be open to claw back. Even though you're 97% allocated, as we go to the first page, we will go through terms. You'll see in the gray, as you flip off the cover sheet, allocated to us into the federal government means you all as a board put it into one of the categories. You've said we are going to put X amount of dollars into category 5.2, 4.1, that laundry list you have of all the money that has been put out. It's allocated when it's in the category. When you award and say, we're gonna give nonprofit XYZ $1 million, at that point it's awarded, you've said they're gonna get it, but not until they sign the contract, and it's a fully executed contract with both sides having signed it, that's when it becomes obligated. What the federal government is saying is they are looking at non-obligated. So Arian's here for two reasons. One, a historical ARP, but in her new role as broadband, you'll all recall we have $10 million sitting in broadband. It is allocated, neither awarded nor obligated. So that's a big pot of funds that's sitting out there that could be at risk. Another big chunk is, you don't really see it in the spreadsheet, but we have been saving enough money back to pay for our indirects. You know how the federal rule said we keep We'll quickly go through to jog your memory. The county received 101 million. Of that, 98 million has been allocated, but that's different from obligated, leaving 3.3 million. I'm sure you guys remember that number. There's 3.3 million that we have yet to allocate. But there's also the 300,000, 330,000 of indirects that would go with that. There's also the million in indirects that would go with the broadband. And then the spreadsheet I passed out, shows each individual category, but you'll see the darker blue shows the headline. So we had 8.7 million to went to public health, multiple categories. 32.5 million went to negative economic impacts. So that is kind of a wrap up of which broad categories. You have the long form in front of you. And then if you look at the green on the bottom, it will walk you through the 17.1 million that right now could be exposed for a clawback. The 3.3 that's unallocated to date plus the indirects, we awarded roughly 300 and some thousand to our own risk management. That was covering direct COVID related expenses. Once we read the fine print and saw everything that actually was allowed to be reimbursed, if I'm saying this correctly, they recently returned $221,000. We fully paid for everything that was eligible. But it's that 221,000 plus the indirects would be associated with it. There was one category, the category that paid for the public health building and a couple other items, we never fully awarded. 2.4 million was allocated. All of it except 76,000 was awarded. Then there's the VOA. It's been a while since we talked about the VOA crosswalk. They were awarded $2 million of ARP. And then when the home ARP additional funds came out, which is separate from our ARP, because the county, whoever receives home ARP has to report on for 20 years. So we were looking for an organization that could handle a very long-term reporting period. So you as a board decided to use home ARP instead of this. Just tomorrow, you will be on your consent as an amendment. George was here last week and some of the dollar amounts were wrong, so we had to amend that process. We've been holding the ARP, regular ARP, until home ARP is confirmed to make sure VOA crosswalk is fully funded. So if the home ARP comes in, that's 2 million plus the associated indirects, and then the broadband we already discussed. So that gets you to $17.1 million that if today Congress said what is allocated as of the March 31st report, that would be what the county would be writing a check to the US Treasury for. Our belief and understanding, knowing that the budget process federally is an October 1 to October 1 fiscal year, they would be looking at the most recent quarterly report. ARP is a end of June to end of June fiscal year. So when they are looking at this, if they decide to do it, they would look at the June report most likely as far as what is obligated or not. And because not only would it be the most recent report, but it would be the annual report, which is a bigger, more robust report than the other 3 quarterlies. So all that to say, if you aren't concerned about what the feds are gonna do, you can tell me to leave the room now, my work here is done. If you would like to have a discussion, which I assume you do, about how we could keep all the decisions you've made in place, but move some stuff around in a way to obligate it. We have some ideas around that. We cannot meet this June 30th deadline through an RFP process. RFPs, it takes 2 weeks to get anything through the BOCC. We have an RFP process, it takes 3 weeks. It would also hit Memorial Day, and to honor our past practices, major holidays, we've usually added that extra half a week. So it'd actually be a 3.5, 4 week process, 2 additional weeks to score and get the award through the BOCC. So there you're looking at roughly 8 weeks. That's the part we control. The part we don't control is getting obligated. We send them a contract, their lawyers send back their suggestions, our lawyers, and there's that negotiation process. And there'd be no way for us to guarantee getting that through by the end of June. So we need to look at sole source opportunities if you are interested in getting all of these funds obligated. For ARP, sole source means that there's only one entity that does the work, then we can sole source it, just much like county procurement. If there's multiple entities, then we have to put it out for an RFP. Any questions before we flip the page? Yes, sir.
So the water system up on 5 Mile, can we sole source that to the city of Spokane, since it would be the city that would be taking over that system? Or would that have to go out to an RFP?
It'd have to go out to an RFP because there are other systems that could apply in the same category. Because there are other water districts who would also apply.
Okay.
So like West Terrace, we were able to sole source because we could not come up with any other entity that would do that work. The developers had developed it and they were gone. Who else are gonna put money in?
Right.
So our only sole sources to date would be the West Terrace project. Recently this year did the 400,000 to Broadlink. They're the only entity doing countywide open access broadband work. And actually, there's only 2. I was gonna say CLA, but that one actually went through a bit.
Well, but you also, didn't we sole source the Medical Lake, Four Lakes water?
All of those were through, you guys put the money into the infrastructure category. And then you'll remember at the end, we put 10 million into any infrastructure category.
Right.
So all of those, including our own, like our own parks, our own, some of the work going up around Mead, so there were some water issues. All of those, the county departments competed against other jurisdictions or entities that do similar work. So it's both, does anybody else have a similar project within the county, or are there multiple people that would want to do this particular project? Hope that makes sense. It gets convoluted. Any other questions at this point? Okay, so next page, just want to quick remind, another number that's right at 17 million, but please don't confuse it with the 17 million right now that's not obligated, is our revenue replacement / indirect / interest income. So per our formula, we chose formula, hindsight, we probably should have chose the 10 million, but we rolled the dice. We have one more year, unless the economy really tanks, we're not gonna get any more money. So I think we should hope for more money because more downside to that than upside. We have a 9.6 in revenue replacement. These indirects are as of our March 31st report. So we already have 21,000, 22,000 we need to back out from the risk management money that was returned. And then Randy and Tessa said $1.5 million is roughly where we are on interest income. We know the indirects and interest income we don't have to worry about. By resolution, once you take it, that's considered obligated. We are fairly confident, but we do have that fairly adjective in there, that the revenue replacement is fine. In the treasury system, when it gets reported, it's in its own category, separate from everything else, revenue replacement is. Next week, all three of us are going to be at the GFOA conference in Portland, getting all of the broadband and ARP sessions. So we're hoping to get a definitive answer, but we're fairly certain this full 17 million is okay. We just want to make sure they're not looking for our revenue replacement to be obligated to a project, because we do eventually have to report on how revenue replacement is spent. We don't report on indirects and interest. Which takes us to broadband. We want to talk about that a little bit separately, since it is a $10 million, wish it was 10 billion, we could solve all of our problems, category. So NTIA, one of our federal agencies, has a statewide grant out that NOAA-Net's the lead entity on. Arian's working closely with them. The county has a portion of that grant, so if that grant is awarded, 2.2 million would be our match. However, Arian has it in writing, of course we don't have a check yet, that WSBO, that's the Washington State Broadband Office, would cover that match upon award. USDA is another grant that Arian's aware of that we hope to apply once it's open. The federal BEAD, that one's a challenge because they're telling us our current money's not obligated, yet they don't even open their NOFO until October. So you can't hold this money, you'll lose it if they claw it back. You wouldn't, and if it opens in October with the holidays, we probably wouldn't know January at the earliest, very earliest. We probably wouldn't know until 2024 if we get that money. So that's not working. And then there's so much money, like 42 billion just in BEAD, if you look nationally. There's other money in other agencies. Arian is watching very closely. And so there could be other opportunities. Anything to add to broadband at this point?
No, I think that that's something that at both the state and federal level, other counties are really frustrated because they are holding these dollars for those one-time matches, and yet the federal government isn't releasing the money for the match. So it's a bit of a catch-22, and we want to make sure in our conversations we present options that preserve the ability to utilize that both in projects as well as in match opportunity. Because those are ongoing clarifications that we're understanding what constitutes the federal match. It may be cash, it may be in kind, so those are some other things we want to stay aware of.
Any questions on this before we flip to the next slide?
On broadband, if I could make a couple of comments. And when the commissioners decided to do this, obviously broadband was one of the big call outs in ARP, right? Let's invest in there. And so the commissioners were very proactive in not only identifying dollars, but then setting up a PDA so we could look countywide at it. And that's what Arian's been leading for the county on that effort. And in many instances, the state has reflected upon how far along we've come with our PDA and Arian's work, and using and looking to Spokane for guidance on how they set up their stuff and get things working. So it is really important that the $10 million was anticipated to leverage a lot of other federal and state dollars. We just got notice last week that our WSBO grant that we were applying for $12 million, we received 0. And yet we're pointed to regularly at Pioneer that we are, and others are reaching out to us to ask us how do we make things advance as far as they have. So that was extremely disappointing. So that's already $12 million that we don't get to count on, which makes the $10 million even more important to make sure we're protecting, continue to leverage in that. So that's another reason to kind of explicitly call this broadband. Broadband is not a cheap solution, so we needed every bit of those matching dollars that we we're trying to get.
Where did the money go to?
So there were 52 applications and 14 awardees. Those that I know of that were awarded, Kittitas, Lincoln, Stevens, Ferry. I have not heard of Whitman. Very interesting, especially given ours was construction ready. Not only didn't have any challenges from the private sector, actually had letters of collaboration. So there are some interesting things afoot. Last week was a mixed bag. Scott alluded to that announcement. We received another announcement from WISBO that was a direct proviso award from the broadband office for 4.8. So to his point, they're asking us to lead in some things. We received a proviso. Heather's working on that. Our state vendor number hasn't come through yet, so we may need the county to fast track that through for us. So again, there's so many things moving, some of which is a bit counter messaging and really disappointing. I will say on behalf, there were a number of other commissioners that heard that news about Spokane, and colorful language ensued because of what, so I really can't really tell you what occurred. We have let the broadband office know that we'd like an official report of the scoring criteria. But again, we want to make sure we can leverage what that grant was for, particularly the 5 small towns in South Spokane County, because we are still waiting on that federal grant that Jeff spoke about. That is what's called a mid-mile grant, and that could actually keep the puzzle pieces whole by applying that funding that we are using with NOAANET for the highway pipes, and look at leveraging some of our other dollars for local projects. So it's a little bit of an element that was unexpected by all means, but we're trying to figure it out.
But bottom line, though, the 10 million is an issue that we need to
Yes.
figure out how we get those dollars
Right.
to the PDA.
To be obligated.
Yes.
And can we just, I mean, we can transfer from one government
The
agency to
transfer
another.
to governments is
It's a-
limited to governments that received an ARP award themselves.
Mm,
So even Waverly received 25,000 based on the formula. We could transfer all 10 million to Waverly, but we can't transfer it to our own PDA because our own PDA didn't receive an ARP award to begin with. Now, we are on version 16 of the amended final rules. So Arian was looking back through some of those amendments again, specifically. We hadn't looked for that particular question before.
Yeah, because I
those
thought that
amendments.
maybe the city,
Because puts it in a little different way of sorting.
Essentially washes the money and you can give it out differently.
Yep,
they
and
could, so they use that to
Yep.
transfer to, okay.
but to your point, there could be some options to move the 10 million from a match category into broadband other category and do an award and obligation off of that. So that's part of what we're bringing
Okay.
for you today.
And then too, on the Northeast PDA, the county provided funding too, but it was part of the RFP.
It was part of
Ours was an award under economic development,
Yep,
$1 million, if I recall.
infrastructure, yeah.
And so the
Yeah, I didn't know if the
cities,
city had, I thought the city had done it differently.
their
They did
percentage,
it.
because hotel motel taxes crashed so bad, but there's very few, I think there's only 3 maybe in the county. The city had a much bigger revenue replacement, the way the formula works. Cities in general had bigger revenue replacement.
They were
numbers than
able to move
counties.
those dollars around more freely.
And once you move to the revenue replacement first,
Okay.
then you don't have to RFP it, you can do direct allocation.
Have we, so I'm unclear, have we moved all our revenue replacement into
The
categories?
9.6 is all we have, so 19 was the base year. So this was our 21,
We weren't eligible for any revenue replacement last
in 22 we weren't
Okay.
eligible, 23, we likely won't be eligible. That's our last year.
This has all been allocated.
Which in our speak means it's been moved to the general.
I moved to the category. There's not a direct spending plan behind it. However, on the next page, there is a spending thought process behind it.
I'm just queuing you right up,
Yes.
sorry. I didn't mean to
I
say
think
that.
what, Commissioner,
Okay.
Commissioner Waldorf, I think what I think I heard you say is, was there a decision made on how to spend the rev replacement indirect stuff? And that's all laid out in the resolution that's referenced here, where the commissioners passed a resolution that said basically, these dollars are committed to spend on county facilities, county technology investments that are being made. So the buckets of categories was decided upon, the actual dollar amounts had not been, but that was part of the, I don't wanna steal Jeff's thunder, that was kind of the ERP system, that was Fair and
Right.
Expo roof, that was some 12B7 work that we had to do on the county here.
And then just one more thing on broadband. Broadband's a big enough deal in the world of ARP. It is the only category that you can use ARP federal dollars to match with. There's no other category that you can use ARP as the non-federal match. You actually can use it as a non-federal match with ARP. Just to highlight the priority of that to Congress. So the next page, as Scott was just referencing, within revenue replacement, and when I say revenue replacement, I'm also including the indirects and the interest. We've not put it to paper to say this is the exact amount of money, but the board had talked about, that's where we planned the ERP, so that's $8 million of the revenue replacement. The fairgrounds, you'll see, has a 4.5 million. We had dedicated in the budget $1.5 million of ARP. We'd also put $1.5 million from REIT, and then we put $1.5 million request to the state legislature. We did not receive any funding from the state legislature, so we're down $1.5 million from something that we need to do. It could be REIT or ARP. As we just heard from Randy, our REIT is way down. We anticipated a haircut where we're getting that full military buzz cut. And so one thing, as you look to your budget, that we could do, REIT can sit in a fund balance. There's no expiration to REIT. ARP, we have this June 30th, new deadline we're dealing with. We have our 2024 requirements you're familiar with, and then our 2026 must be done. So one thing I wanted to present as a thought process for you is you could move the 1.5 from REIT plus the 1.5 the state didn't do. We also have $750,000 worth of window replacement in the Public Works building currently scheduled for REIT. We could move some of those to ARP because you can make decisions about REIT, as I say, into the future. And then as Commissioner French, you brought up the comp plan staffing issue. Don't have a number yet from Scott Chesney. I plugged in 900 because that kind of made my math work out. But I was thinking if it's 2 or 3 people for 2 or 3 years through 2026, if they're fully loaded versus the contract, I know there's some funding possibly coming from the state, but that 900 is just a plug number. The others are the anticipated costs. So right there, one category, if you look back to our first slide in here, category 3, which is public health, negative economic impact, public sector capacity. That's one the board chose not to put funds. You guys were focused externally more. And there are categories, there's 5 categories in public sector capacity. I didn't bring my yellow sheet with me. One of them is staffing. So like the comp plan staffing could be out of that one. One of them is administrative, and that's where the roof, HVAC of the fairgrounds, the windows, that'd be the more administrative. The other is effective service delivery, which, I mean, ERP, that's the poster child for effective service delivery. And so talking with Dale Anderson, he's very comfortable that all of these projects would qualify to be moved into a new category. They also all qualify as a sole source because no one else is going to be buying our ERP, and the county has no reason to buy anybody else's ERP. So they do qualify for sole source. So it's kind of a three-way movement. Some of the expenses that we've been planning on in revenue replacement could be moved to our public sector capacity categories, freeing up that fund. Leaving broadband, there's different opinions on sole sourcing broadband. When I spoke with Dale last week, he said, okay, Heather talked with him today, not so sure. So we could either, to protect our 10 million of broadband, we can look at sole sourcing, we can look at amending the resolution to revenue replacement. And it could all be done on the same consent agenda. So, we all just hold hands and jump off this cliff together. So there's just some different ideas on how we're approaching this at keeping our $10 million of broadband secure. And then I do think there's a case to be made to use some of these public sector categories to get everything obligated while still performing these same tasks. And then in gray, those are just all the different resolutions that Arian, Heather, and I kind of brainstormed depending on your decisions. This would come with a big package of resolutions. I think versus one resolution, all these different things, it makes sense for it to be more of a package. With that, Heather, Arian, anything before we go to questions? Thoughts, questions? Do you want us to keep looking at ways to obligate everything? What's your concern level with that?
Was there any discussion at the WASAC meeting about, folks concerned about their funds?
No, I think they're waiting for the GFOA conference this week to see what's really happening, what's going on, and what's being said there. I think when we were just back in DC, there's concerns. There was concerns when I was back with WASAC. Eric and I were back we met with all the state delegation in January. And on that day, they were definitely asking us to talk to our representative in our district because the Democrats were definitely worried that that was going to be potentially part of the discussion for the debt ceiling was to claw back. So this has been a discussion back in DC, for a while. So I think it's definitely on the table as a chip to bargain with.
I saw John Colton. I know he no longer works for Senator Murray. I saw him at an event this week, talked with other offices. The advice has all been you'd be wise to have it buttoned up by June. No one has that magic crystal ball for the future, but they're like, there's enough of a possibility that advice had been, we suggest you look at it.
In its simplest form, I know there's a lot of numbers out here, there's a lot of cross connection stuff, but it's its simplest form. It is committing to spend the same dollars, just moving them into a different category so it protects against the potential for a clawback. Again, I know there's a lot of moving numbers around here, but it's saves a little bit against REIT because we know that's down, that's heading downwards, and still protects broadband investment dollars that the board wants to make.
Some of it's shifting the funds, some of it's shifting the expenses. But in the end, it can all land in a category that is obligated. Because with the county, we sign an MOU with the appropriate department. So for ERP, Ashley is the lead, so we would sign an MOU. That's what we've done. Kyle signed a few for us. So we can quickly get those obligated.
Hamburgers first. So when I look at this table, the yellow table that you were just walking us through, it still seems like, am I missing something, or are we still off by like 3.4 million?
Oh, there's more, it was actually 24 if you go to the bottom, there's that 14 and the 10. We're giving you, I didn't want to come with, here's the perfect 17 million for you. So this is actually more than we need to move around. So you can pick and choose, this is more of a buffet to give direction around. But yes, we wouldn't have to do all of this.
The front page, Commissioner, the 17,174 is what we're trying to solve for.
Right?
So 14,150 of those four items get to 14,150. If we can solve on the sole source of broadband,
No, but I'm just, is this added to this? I'm not
At the
following.
bottom, yeah, the
17,174,
Is everything but broadband.
right, and then on this yellow, it's 14,150 plus broadband.
but it could be to get to our 17,150, if we can solve on the sole source answer, you could commit to 14,150 plus 3 of the broadband there, and the other 7 by amending the resolution for revenue replacement indirects, the other 7 basically goes into that category. So the 10 is still held.
If you move the 8 million of ERP and the fair roof to a public sector capacity, you have taken everything that your plans so far around revenue replacement. There's no longer an expense in your plans on revenue replacement. That opens up your whole revenue replacement to help protect broadband.
Sure. Yeah, I might need better information on, it's just a
I'm
lot
happy
of
to sit down.
spreadsheets
And,
here.
and this is just the first.
But yes,
go,
I get what you're
because
saying.
They're gonna go to GFOA and get further clarification.
This is a first round. We're not looking for any other, unless you're gonna say, don't worry about it, we'll roll the dice. You know, that's a decision of today. But we wanted to bring it up, have the discussion, assuming you'll want us to go forward with some thoughts. We'll all be at GFOA next week. So in 2 weeks, we'd be back with what we've learned at GFOA. And then at that point, that'll give you another 2 to 3 weeks to button up anything to get a final approval by the end of June.
Commissioner French.
Yeah, I'd be all in favor of you guys obligating and doing whatever you have to do that. I mean, to me, it's either obligate and preserve or do nothing and lose. And so I don't happen to be in the mood to lose, so.
There's no upside to rolling the dice, there's only
There's no
downside.
upside, yeah, so I'd be in favor of you guys doing the magic you do and preserving as much as you can. And then we'll deal with that after
And
know that we've,
we can preserve it all.
yeah.
We can obligate it
I
all.
don't know what the downside is of that.
No, there's no downside.
Yeah, so let's make it happen.
And then in the end, come October, if this is a non-issue, you can rearrange the deck chairs again.
Make sure it's in.
But if it is an issue, then at least everything, we have to leave it where it is, but at least we can spend it where it is.
I don't want to be on the Titanic with a bucket trying to bail water.
No, it's almost like what we're trying to do with the Blake decision, you know,
Yeah.
in trying to just be proactive in case, you know, and hopefully the state comes through. So I kind of feel the same thing with this, that we just need to be proactive in case the feds don't.
So I get that we don't have time for an RFP process before June 30th, but if we moved funding around into these different categories, does it prohibit us from having an RFP process in the future for some of the funds? If we choose, if the Board of Commissioners would choose to allocate them out to the community versus internally?
In the revenue replacement category, yes.
Okay.
That'd be the only.
That's the only
place.
category.
The one nice thing about the broadband being in revenue replacement is you can use it in any of the 3 categories. So it can go to the mid-mile projects, it can go to match, it can go to
The other.
the other. If we stick that in any one of the 3 buckets and the legislature decides to say if you remove money from a bucket, it comes back, we risk losing that money. And at this point, not knowing what they have on the table, I don't want to see anything go to a bucket that may be pulled. So I feel like that's really the safest place for broadband to be.
So then we will keep moving forward.
Yep.
And after GFOA, come back again to further the conversation. I'm happy to meet with any of you one-on-one. My first round of this, Scott, who's well-versed, I made his eyes cross. And so, and he has a lot of background. Like, let's try it this way. So I fully can appreciate those of you who haven't lived the last year like the three of us. It's not super intuitive, but there's enough buckets crossing enough different ways. This is the best we've come up with so far to present.
Yeah, and I'd say definitely reach out. I met with Jeff this morning to try to get an understanding. It's the first time seeing it. So definitely reach out in the meantime before when do you guys head down?
This Sunday, it starts this coming.
Starts on Sunday. What kind of a conference starts on Sunday? I don't know.
Yay.
But Sunday at noon.
Okay. Thank you. So Scott, so we've completed all the items that we had from today. Are we going to have some executive sessions?
Yep, they're both heading of potential.
Yes, they are. So 2 pending potential litigation, executive sessions pursuant to RCW 4231-10-1I. The first is in regard to the Superior Court. The second is in regard to pending potential litigation in regards to a piece of property up north, case formerly Glades property, if anybody has recollection of that. The first one, I would say approximately 15 minutes. The second one, approximately 20 minutes. And for the first,
Decisions?
huh?
Any decisions
I do not believe so. I do not believe so. For the first one, I think the only people would be the board, Scott Simmons and myself. I think that one we are pretty well along on. The second one would be the board, Scott Simmons, myself, Scott Chesney, and Jessica Pope.
Do you want to start with theirs?
We can start with yours.
Since they're here. So we'll start with that executive session, which will be for 20 minutes, or 15 minutes, no, 20 minutes.
Sorry, we
On
reversed it.
property.
Oh,
This is the fun one.
Yes.
So, okay, so we do anticipate to be in for 35 minutes total. At which point we will adjourn for the day because there no decisions are anticipated to be made. So once we go into executive session, we'll be adjourning after 35 minutes, and if it extends longer, we'll ensure that clerk knows for the minutes. Anything else? Did you announce too, where and what? Chris, do you have the executive session link?
Yep, and I will be right over there.
Okay, very good, thank you. Okay, so we will start executive session, we'll say at 3:45, which just gives us a few minutes to get all the computer stuff worked around. Okay. So we'll be in until 4:20. Okay, thank you all very much, and we'll see everyone tomorrow.